Have you ever felt the hush of stone beneath centuries? Not silence, but a hush, like breath held by the earth itself. Have you heard footsteps echo where no voice should follow? It is said there are places beneath Rome where even light does not linger long and prayers decay before they reach heaven. Welcome, dearest listener. Before the tale unfolds, know this: you are safe here. You are loved. There is no danger in the story, only wonder, only memory. You are not alone. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now, find stillness. Hold your coffee close, let the breath slow, and let us begin. The vault was never marked on any papal record, not even in the archives that lay hidden behind red wax seals and golden keys, where scribes whispered only in candlelight and dust. Even the rats had forgotten it. Beneath the bones of San Giusto, under a crypt sealed by accident and forgotten by time, there lay a vault, circular, seamless, and still. It had no doors, no hinges, no staircase leading down. Only those who dreamt the vault found it, and even then, only once. Brother Matteo had never meant to find it. He was a quiet man, more shadow than flesh, known to speak softly to bees and relics alike. He lived in the silence of old parchment and incense smoke, copying sacred texts with fingers that shook from age or awe. His cell was the last along the eastern wall of the monastery, cold in winter, cold in summer, and always damp with the breath of the earth. And yet, one night, he dreamt of heat. He saw flames curled like serpents, dancing in a circle, and in their center lay a relic, wrapped in blood-colored silk. It pulsed with slow light, as if it had a heart. When he reached for it, he awoke, sweat-stained, trembling, and with the scent of burning myrrh thick in his nose. The dream returned the next night, and again, until Matteo, whose knees crackled like old wood and whose eyes failed even by candlelight, left his bed at midnight and walked barefoot through the crypt. No lamp, no rosary, only the breath of the stones guiding him. He passed sarcophagi, whose names had been worn away by centuries of weeping air. He passed altars, where the wax had long ceased to melt. And he came, at last, to a stretch of wall that bore no cross, no carving, only a faint warmth, as though something behind it remembered the sun. There was no visible seam, but he pressed his palm, flat, and the stone gave in like breath drawn after morning. The air that greeted him was warm, not like a fire, like flesh. He stepped inside. The chamber was round, carved from obsidian and dark limestone, veined with faint gold like the handwriting of gods. At the center lay a pedestal of polished basalt, and upon it the relic from his dreams. The silk was soaked with something thick and brown. He did not need to unwrap it, for the cloth bled. Slowly, patiently, a drop every few heartbeats. The stone beneath it bore no stain. It drank each drop in silence. Matteo knelt. His body knew reverence even before his mind understood fear. He did not touch it. He only whispered, as if to an old wound, "Who placed you here?" There was no answer. But the room inhaled. The gold veining pulsed once, like veins beneath old skin, and then stillness. He stayed until dawn. When he emerged from the vault, the scene had vanished. No other monk believed him. But from that day onward, Matteo no longer walked hunched. He no longer shook. He no longer feared death. He returned once more. Many winters later, though none saw him go, only the scent of burning myrrh lingered in his cell. And beneath the monastery, in the forgotten vault, the relic sat still, bleeding quietly into stone that would never overflow. Some say it is the heart of a saint who was buried alive for refusing to renounce a forgotten god. Others say it is no heart at all, but a piece of a fallen angel's wing. And some still dream of it, though they have never set foot in Rome. But the mists hold another tale. Have you ever stood before a mirror that did not show your face but something older? Have you ever felt a chill behind glass, as though breath once lingered there? not yours, but another's. It is said there are mirrors that do not reflect. They remember. And further still, there is one more story. Come closer, beloved one. Let the hush of the world cradle you. We are with you, always. You are held. You are safe. You are loved. Now tell us, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it in your part of the night? Take one long breath. Let the warmth wrap around your shoulders like an old robe. And let us begin. Before the catacombs were catacombs, before Rome bore the name that conquered nations, there was a woman they called Selene. She lived in the shadow of 7 hills, long before the marble temples rose, when offerings were made with petals and breath, not gold and empire. Selene was a priestess of the moon, not the orb that hung in the sky, but the moon as a veil, a whisper, a gate. They say she could call dreams into bowls of still water, that she spoke in the language of owls and poppies, that her eyes were pale as opal, and when she wept, the wind changed direction. But the world does not love its wise women for long. When the new gods came, loud, triumphant, clothed in purple and silver, her temple was torn down stone by stone, and yet they feared to kill her. She was not executed, she simply vanished into the soil. Some say she walked into the hills and folded herself into a cave. Others believe she was buried alive beneath her own altar, singing until the last breath faded. But her mirror, that was not forgotten. Forged from obsidian, carved in the night of a blood eclipse, it was said to hold the last image she ever saw. And that mirror, they say, was hidden deep in the Roman catacombs, walled into a crypt with no name. It lay untouched for over 1,000 years, until a blind mason named Lucio was hired to restore a crumbling chamber beneath the church of St. Anastasia. He had no eyes, yet saw the structure of stone in ways others never could. With his fingertips, he read the floors. With his palms, he mapped time. One morning, or perhaps it was evening, for the light never truly reached there, Lucio ran his hand across a cold, perfect seam. Not brick, not plaster. Something smoother. He pressed, gently. The wall cracked inward with a low sigh, and a panel fell open to reveal a black disk, the size of a basin mounted to the wall, untouched by age or dust. He felt it, cold, colder than ice, though the chamber was warm, and though he could not see it. Lucio whispered, "You are watching me." That night, he dreamt in color for the first time in his life. He dreamt of white poppies growing from ash. He dreamt of a woman kneeling in still water, her lips moving in a language he'd never heard but somehow knew. He dreamt of himself standing beneath a moon that bled gently into the horizon, and a mirror that did not show his face but hers. In the morning, his hands shook as he returned to the chamber. No one else saw the mirror. It was as if it had vanished into the wall. But Lucio knew. He spoke to it. Every day, as he worked, "I do not know your name," he said, "but I think you know mine." He told the mirror of the city above, of the scaffolds and bells and pigeons that sang where temples once stood. He told it of lost languages, of dreams he could not remember but felt in his bones. And the mirror listened. On the 7th day, when he placed his hand once more upon the black glass, he saw, not with his eyes, but with memory. He saw Selene, her face worn with sorrow, but radiant still. He saw her kneeling beside her mirror, whispering her soul into its depths before the earth swallowed her. And he saw her smile, not with joy, but with recognition. She had been waiting. Lucio wept, not for fear, not for grief, but because for the first time, someone had seen him. The mirror never spoke, but it remembered. When Lucio died, many years later, a single obsidian shard was found sewn into the lining of his coat. No one knew how it got there, but it was warm to the touch. And when held beneath moonlight, it seemed to shimmer with the outline of a face. Was it the face of Selene, or the echo of Lucio's own soul, mirrored into eternity? No one knows, but to this day, the masons in that church refuse to work in the crypt alone. They say sometimes the walls are colder than death, and if you touch the right stone at midnight, your dreams will speak in a voice not your own. And further still, there is one more story. Have you ever heard weeping that was not human, yet mourned as though it had lost everything? Have you stood in a holy place and felt something beneath you, waiting? There are wells under Rome that were never meant for water. Altars built not to bless, but to bind. And not all things buried beneath churches were ever forgiven. But listen, there is yet another name whispered in the wind. You are with us now, and we with you. There is no fear in this telling, only the quiet return of stories long forgotten. And you, yes, you are safe. You are loved. You are held. Before we descend, tell us where in the world are you resting tonight? And what hour of hush surrounds you now? Hold close the warmth. Breathe softly. And we shall begin. There was a church near the edge of the old forum, a place where the stones remembered the sandals of senators and saints alike. Its name had faded with time, though its tower still cast a crooked shadow across broken columns and pigeons. Within its nave stood a font, dry, cracked, and long disused. It was carved from green marble, streaked with veins of crimson, like old wounds sealed in stone. The water had not flowed for hundreds of years, not since the day the baptismal child screamed loud enough to shake the rafters, and never stopped screaming. They drained the font. They closed the well beneath it, and they buried the records under silence. But time does not forget, even when paper burns. In the spring of a restless year, a young deacon named Elian was assigned to the church, not for his faith, but for his quiet. He was gentle, slight, and often mistaken for younger than he was. He came not seeking glory, but stillness. He found something else. The first time he heard the weeping, it was near dusk. The nave was empty. The candles had long since guttered. He had been sweeping near the font when the sound reached him. Soft, distant, like a child trying not to cry. He searched the pews. He opened every door. He even stepped outside into the golden spill of evening. Nothing. But when he returned, the font was warm to the touch. Elian told no one. And yet, the weeping returned. Night after night, always just beyond hearing. Then on the seventh night, he saw it. A trickle of moisture along the side of the font. Not water, thicker, darker. It caught the candlelight like old sap, red, brown, slow. He leaned close and whispered, not in prayer, but in pity. Who left you down there? The ground beneath him pulsed once, like breath held and released. He stumbled back, crossing himself, though the gesture felt useless, like a blade held up to a storm. The next day, he unearthed the old ledgers. They were locked, half-burned, stitched with dust. But one name remained, scrawled in a shaking hand. Caius Varro III, a Roman priest, baptized under Constantine, later excommunicated for heresies of the undervault. Nothing more. But deeper in the book, a note in a different hand. The altar beneath the font must remain sealed. The thing that dwells there is not to be pitied. It remembers too much. Elian tried to sleep, but the weeping came again. And this time, it spoke. Not words, but feeling. Grief. So vast, it had no edge. Loneliness carved deeper than Catacomb. He returned to the font with a chisel in hand, and began to pry. The marble cracked, like old bone. Beneath it lay a well, bricked over, black as breathless night. He removed the first brick. Then another, and then silence. Not quiet, not peace. A silence that felt like the world had turned its face away. And from within the well something moved, not with threat, but with sorrow. A shape rose, veiled, hunched, swaddled in shadow. Its body was thin, but tall. The veil that hid its face shimmered like mourning lace. It did not speak. But Elian knew this was not a ghost, not a soul. It was what remained when something had been starved of forgiveness for too long. The font had not been a font. It had been a lock. The water had not been for baptism. It had been for keeping something submerged. The figure stepped onto the stone. Its feet left no sound. Elian did not run. He bowed and wept, for he had seen not a demon, but something older than the word. Something cast out not for evil, but for being too full of sorrow. The veil lifted, just enough, and behind it, a face, endless, genderless, carved in grief, eyes, like wounds, that had never closed, a mouth that trembled not with hunger, but with song never sung. Then it turned, and descended once more into the well. Not forced, not imprisoned, returning, because it had been seen, and that was enough. Elian resealed the well, not with stone, with prayer. The font never wept again, but the church grew warmer, and on certain nights, just after dusk, the candles light themselves. Some say Elian still visits, though he vanished long ago. Others say the thing beneath the font waits, not for release, but for remembrance. For not all demons are cursed. Some are simply lonely, and some fonts were never meant to cleanse, only to contain. But the shadows remember more. Have you ever tasted something so old it remembered the hands that shaped it? Have you ever held bread still warm with prayer, though centuries have passed? It is said that some offerings do not decay, not because they are holy, but because they are unfinished. And so it was, but the shadows remember more. You are still here, beloved. So are we. Let your heart rest. Let the silence of this hour hold you gently. You are loved. You are safe. You are not alone. Now, before we cross the threshold, softly tell us, where in the world are you tonight? And what hour does your clock whisper? Take one final sip. Let the hush deepen around your shoulders, and come with us. The bread is waiting. In a quiet convent, hidden near the old Appian Way, past gardens overgrown with rosemary and vines, there lies a silver plate on a simple wooden altar. Upon it rests a single loaf of bread, round, modest, unbroken. It has sat there for nearly 1,000 years. The nuns do not speak of it often, not from secrecy, but reverence. It is called La Benedetta, the Blessed One, but no one remembers who baked it. The records speak only of a woman named Sister Daria, a novice cloistered in Tender 37. She had no family name, no birthplace marked, only her hands, always warm, always kneading. They say she would rise before the sun to prepare the Eucharist, that her bread never crumbled, never burned, never soured, until one morning she did not come to prayer. Her bed was made, her sandals placed by the door, her apron still smelled of flour, but she was gone, vanished, as though the air had swallowed her gently, without pain. All that remained was the loaf, still warm. The other sisters, stricken with grief, placed it upon the altar in the smallest chapel, a temporary act, they said, a gesture of mourning. But the days passed, then weeks, then winters, and the bread never changed. It did not mold, it did not harden, it did not break when touched. It remained soft, fragrant, waiting. Over time, the chapel was renamed in her memory. No one dared consume it, but they prayed beside it. They lit candles and whispered thanks, not just for sustenance but for presence, for it felt, to each who stood near, that someone was still listening. And then, many generations later, a new novice arrived. Her name was Alba. She was curious, bright-eyed, with a voice that trembled when she sang. She asked the older sisters about the loaf. They smiled, but said little. She visited the chapel often, sang softly near the altar. Sometimes she thought she felt warmth near the plate, like the breath of someone just gone. One night, during a thunderstorm, the wind shattered a chapel window. The candles were snuffed, the door creaked open, and Alba, frightened and alone, stepped toward the altar. She didn't mean to touch the bread, but her hand brushed it. It was still warm. She bowed her head, whispered a prayer. She did not know she knew, and broke off a small piece. The moment it touched her tongue, she fell. Not in pain, not in fear, but into a dream deeper than sleep. The sisters found her the next morning, kneeling, silent, eyes open, humming a tune none could name. She awoke 3 days later, and spoke in 3 languages she had never studied. For weeks afterward, she wandered the crypts at night, barefoot, murmuring to the walls, naming names long buried. The sisters feared for her, but she was not lost. She said she was guided by hands that remembered the shaping of dough, by a voice that had never truly left. "She's still here," Alba whispered once, tracing the air above the altar. "But she's not waiting for death. She's waiting for a promise to be fulfilled." When asked what promise, she only smiled and said nothing more. The bread, even now, remains, still round, still whole. Visitors say it glows faintly when no one looks. Others say that on the feast of Saint Daria, a name the church never canonized, but which the convent claimed, the scent of fresh bread fills the halls, though no oven is lit. Some believe the loaf is a relic. Others believe it is a vow, sealed in flour and time. But a few, the oldest among the sisters, believe the bread was never meant to be eaten, because it is still being made. The kneading never ended. The prayer never finished. And until the last name is remembered, until the final echo is sung, the loaf will not break. Let us now turn to the next whispered tale. Have you ever entered a place so still, the silence felt like breath paused mid-prayer? Have you ever seen faces without eyes, yet felt them watching from walls older than memory? It is said there are songs not written to be sung by the living, songs too ancient to be remembered and too sorrowful to be forgotten. Let us now turn to the next whispered tale. You are safe, beloved. Even here, in shadow, you are not alone in the hush. For we are beside you, and the silence listens kindly. You are loved, and you are held. Now tell us softly, where in the world are you resting tonight? And what time does your quiet heart keep? Draw your blanket closer. Let the night lean in, and come with us into the walls. Beneath the Basilica of Santa Croce in Jerusalem, where relics of thorns and crosswood slept behind glass, there was a hole sealed off for centuries. It was not part of the known crypts, not charted on maps, not spoken of, even by the gray-bearded priests who had spent their lives in the catacombs. Some said it had collapsed in a quake long ago. Others said it was sealed deliberately, not to protect what lay inside, but to protect the world from it. The truth was quieter and stranger. It began with the fresco, a mural discovered behind a wall of crumbling plaster during restoration. 100 faces, perhaps more, painted in faded ochre and ash, not framed or aligned, but scattered, clustered, wild. Each face bore an open mouth, not screaming, singing, though the mouths were too wide, too empty, and none of the faces had eyes. The workers joked nervously, called it the choir, but one by one they refused to return, not for superstition, but because they said the room hummed, only when no one spoke, only when they were alone. One young man named Nico stayed behind. He was not a believer. He was a sculptor by trade, hired to assess structural damage. He studied the mural. He traced the mouths with his eyes, then his fingers, and he listened. At first, there was nothing. Then, on the third evening, as he sat in the silence of the crypt, he heard it, a hum, low, breathless, like voices far beneath the earth. He pressed his ear to the wall. The fresco pulsed with warmth. The mouths did not move, but the sound grew stronger. Not chaotic, not frightening. A song with no words, but shaped by grief, by longing, by devotion without anchor. Nico returned each night. He no longer slept in his apartment. He slept beside the fresco, curled like a pilgrim beside a shrine. He stopped answering his phone. he stopped returning home. The other workers said nothing. They avoided the room. Then, one morning, the foreman found the wall cracked. Not broken, split, as though something within had pushed gently outward. And beyond the fracture, a hidden doorway. Behind it, a room of skulls. They were arranged in a spiral, floor to ceiling, each mouth open, each grinning, each perfectly preserved. No eyes, no inscriptions, no bones beyond the heads, only the spiral, only the song. And at its center, Nico sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, lips parted. He was not dead, but he would not wake. He hummed softly. In time with the hush, the workers sealed the room again, and the priest said prayers. They did not fully remember, but the fresco remains, and the mouths still. On certain nights, when fog drapes Rome like a shroud, and the wind avoids the basilica's steps, pilgrims whisper that they hear the hymn, a lullaby sung by the skulls of those who once worshipped beneath the city, forgotten by history but not by sorrow. Some say it was a sect cast out by both pagan and Christian alike. Others say it was a gathering of mourners who gave up speech and sight to listen more closely to the voice of the earth. And some say the mouths are not singing at all. They are listening, waiting for the last verse, for the final breath, for the soul who will complete the spiral, not with death, but with silence. Nico is still there, they say, a new skull among the old, still humming, still part of the choir. And if you walk near that wall, and the silence changes shape, listen closely. You may hear your own name, carried softly in the echo. Let us now turn to the last whispered tale. Have you ever stood before an altar with no offerings, no candles, no cross, only silence? Have you ever felt that a place was not abandoned, but simply waiting for something beneath your understanding? It is said there are altars not built to honor the heavens, but to listen to what lies beneath. Let us now turn to the last whispered tale. And you, yes, you are safe. This story holds you like dusk, holds the last light. You are loved, in shadow, as in sun. You are remembered. Now, softly tell us, where in the world do you listen from tonight? And what hour stands watch outside your window? The journey nears its close. Let the breath fall gently. Let the final story rise. And we begin. In the deepest chamber of the Vatican's oldest library, there is a book that is never opened. It has no title, no gilding. Its pages are sealed with a thread of black hair, bound through holes not pierced by metal, but grown into the parchment itself. It is called Il Libro Sottosopra, the book that faces downward. Few know of it, fewer still have touched it. But those who have speak of a name written on every page in dust that cannot be seen under light. A name that shifts with the voice of the reader's own fear. It tells the story of an altar built before Rome rose from the marshes, before the Etruscans, before the hill tribes, when the land was only rock and river and wind. The altar was not raised for gods. It was carved to listen. Its shape was wrong, too flat, too low, veined with strange gold that pulsed during eclipses and smelled faintly of rain on old metal. No structure was ever built above it, because no roof was worthy, and because the stars needed to see it. Every 100 years, it calls, not with sound, but with sorrow. It calls not for worshippers, but for one, only one, a single soul who feels the call like a hunger behind the heart. In our age, that soul was a man named Miro. He was a scholar, a widower, a man who had buried more memories than he had left to live. One evening, while walking alone along the Tiber's southern curve, he felt the ground beneath his feet tilt, only slightly, but enough. The wind shifted, the river hissed, the stars blinked, and in his mind, a whisper. Not words, a need. He followed it. Not with compass or candle, with absence. He went where silence pulled, and there, beneath a ruin so forgotten, no god had ever been named to it, Miro found the altar. It was flat, silent, cold to the touch, but not lifeless. He knelt, and the air around him changed. Not darker, not colder, just older. He laid his hand upon the stone and saw, not with eyes, not with mind, but with something deeper. He saw rivers that flowed backwards. He saw cities born, not from conquest, but from burial. He saw faces, not human, not cruel, watching from beneath the earth with a patience that could wait through time. The altar was not for them. It was of them. It was not a bridge. It was an ear, and it had listened for so long. Listened to wars, prayers, births, betrayals. Listened through plagues and fire, and psalms. And now, it listened to Miro, but he had no words to give, only grief. He wept, and the stone warmed. He remembered her name, the wife he had lost, and the wind carried it downward. He remembered his son, who had died before breath, and the silence accepted it like a blessing. He remembered his failures, his cowardice, his love, his loneliness, and the altar listened, not to forgive, not to bless, but to hold. And when he stood again, he was not lighter, but he was no longer alone. The stone was just stone, but his heart no longer echoed. He returned once more, years later, just before his death. He laid beside the altar, closed his eyes, and was never found again. Some say the altar took him. Some say he became part of the silence. Others believe he was never there at all. But on nights when the moon is veiled, when the wind moves against the grain of time, some hear a breath beneath the ground, a soft inhale, a sacred exhale, not of a god, not of a demon, but of the world itself, listening. And somewhere in that breath, the name Miro lingers, not spoken, but known. And so, as breath returns to silence, the stories return to stone,